Habari gani? Habari gani? Welcome everyone. Karibuni. Welcome again to Kumbukeni. Kumbukeni is the place where we are decolonizing our minds, telling the African story from an African perspective. My name again is Nduko. I am one of the co-hosts. Today we have our guest all the way from Kenya. She'll get to introduce herself in a few minutes, but I will hand it over to my brothers to go ahead and introduce themselves. Karibuni, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Adesoji Ginla, and welcome again to Kumbukeni. And today we're going to be discussing something further on from our topic from last week. But before I delve into that and I get carried away, I would ask Brother Milton to do the necessary.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you from New York City on a cloudy, dull, London-like day. This is Milton Alimadi. Welcome to Kumbukeni, where, as the sister said, we decolonize the mind, combine our history with contemporary challenges. Asanteni sana, karibu.
Yes. So again, we are joined by our guest all the way from Kenya, the host of Msingi Afrika TV on YouTube. And we will share their links so that you can subscribe, follow them, and support them so that they can continue doing the wonderful work that we are all doing. Chioma, I'll hand it over to you so that you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nduko, and thank you, everyone. And thanks for this amazing opportunity. My name is Chioma Phillips. I am, like you said, the host of Msingi Afrika Television. I'm also the editor of Msingi Afrika magazine. And we spell Africa with a K, so if you're searching for us on Google, just slide that in there. What we endeavor to do is tell the true African story and bring a restoration of, healing, restoration and rebirth of the African people and African continent, because we know how amazing African people are. We just have to believe it so that we can walk true to it. So thanks again for this opportunity.
I'm glad you reminded them how amazing we are. It's always good to remind ourselves and our brothers and sisters, because we forget when all this propaganda is happening, we forget how amazing we are. So it's a funny thing how Chioma and Kumbukeni met. We have a community where a couple of us belong to. It's called Nubia. It's a place where if you are a Black person, a Black brother or sister looking to, and we're talking about an African brother or sister looking to connect with other African brothers and sisters, this is the place you need to go to and learn about your history and learn about yourself. It's Nubia. And on Nubia, one of the Nubians posted Msingi Afrika's video, which I'm going to put in the chat in a few minutes. And I watched it and I said, we need to talk to this woman. I want to hear more about what she's saying, but it's the way she explained it that yes, she did a good job at it. And so I reached out to Tunacheki's Mario Omari, who was here with us a couple of weeks ago for our launch show. And I said, do you know her? And he said, yeah, they're Tunacheki's friend. I said, yeah, please, can you do the connect? And we connected, and it's history. It's history. It's all history since. But it's been a wonderful experience getting to know them, and we look forward to the work that we're going to do together on Africa. So today we are talking about the war against Africa. We're talking about GMOs and indigenous seeds, and we'll go right into our conversation. Chioma, if you could please speak on this, GMOs, indigenous seeds. You say this and people are like, what is GMO? What is indigenous seeds? And why is there such an outrage about this?
Okay. So GMOs are genetically modified organisms. And what has basically happened is that man, in his lack of wisdom, has decided that they can do better than God. And so they've gone to the lab and decided they want to make seeds that are powerful enough to withstand the effects of herbicides and will be solely dependent really on agrochemicals in terms of fertilizers. So the NPKs that they're so busy manufacturing and messing the environment around with. And they want to do this because obviously what happens is that once you commercialize a seed, then now you can start to make as much money as possible. So it's the usual, banal conversation about how rich can a company or an individual get. Indigenous seeds are the seeds that have existed since time immemorial. Our ancestors have saved and cultured and nurtured these seeds and exchanged them community to community since before, for however long African communities existed. Sorry, I noticed there's some feedback.
Yeah,
Should I
sorry.
continue? Okay. Yeah, so because there was a wisdom, and there has always been a wisdom among the African people, among indigenous communities across the world, really. They understand the value and the power of seed. Obviously, to grow crops and to sustain generations of people in health, because food and health are so intimately connected. And so what they did over the years and over eons of time is identify the plants which were strongest. From those plants, you don't eat everything, which apparently, commercialization tends to do. You keep some for another season, and not necessarily the very next season, because they understand that something in that environment has identified that plant and might be waiting for it for the next season. So they wait a little bit, keep it in store. And then when it is time to bring it forth again, bring it forth again. Or go and exchange with their neighbors, not necessarily right next door, but even in far-flung areas. And so that way, you end up always nurturing your crops, just the same way that you would do with animal husbandry. So this goat and this goat are better. So you work with the seed and then eliminate one male from the pool, and bring in another one, and then you continue to grow the strength of your herd. Yeah. And so indigenous seeds are the ones that carry with them the history and the wisdom of the people, but also bring forth the strongest plants, the healthiest plants, and also results in healthier outcomes. And well, as long as the soil and the water are also in tandem, because it's all a balance.
You're taking me back, as you explain, you're taking me back to my grandma and how they did it back then. This is what you're talking about, how they grew. They didn't need to keep going back every year to the store to buy new seeds, because their harvest had seed and they could just keep replanting that. And you're right, it was a community thing. If my grandma had excess, she would give it to the neighbors. But I'm glad you mentioned that exchange where we can, because our topic today is going to touch on that and how that has been, what's the word? It's being hindered in currently. So I'll hand it over to Brother Adesoji to get to the next question.
Oh, yes. Again, welcome, Sister Chioma. So my question would be, to put a flippant twist to it, is there like a body of people on a secret island somewhere, screaming like every time you want to plant a seed, it's like 1 billion Kenyan shillings or 10 billion naira before you plant? Could you enlighten as to if there's such a body exists, or is just a figment of our imagination?
No, it's not a figment of your imagination. You see, as any wise African knows, if you go to the shop and you buy a fruit, within it there is a seed. And that seed, if you take it to your land, which is healthy and fertile, if you plant it there, it will grow and give you ample replicas of whatever it was that you bought, along with more seed. And so really, it removes the power from anyone with a commercial interest to make profit off if they give you powerful seed to continue, generating life from, which is why now you see the increase in seedless produce out there, which is an abomination in itself. Let's just leave that for now, because you're eating something without life in it, but we shall suspend that conversation for another day. Now, what has happened? As you're gradually seeing, there's a group of people or groups of people who have decided that whatever occurs in nature should not be communally owned. There must be a way to capitalize on it. So they're going so far as even to dare to say that water should not be something that people can freely gain access to, simply because they want to find a way to commercialize it.
I think Coke is doing some stuff with that, yeah.
And I think Nestle, I'm not sure. Let me speak with caution in case they decide to come and knock on my door.
Allegedly, right?
Yeah,
we are alleging.
Yeah, let's use allegedly, that's convenient term, allegedly. So when it comes to feed, as you have seen, there's been an increase in GMOs and commercialization of seeds and hybridization, because hybrids also remove the power of the seed to really reproduce with strength. Yeah. So there are people who have decided there must be a way to make as much money as possible, as much profit as possible off plants, off food. So beyond just what would be manufacturing food products, which are byproducts of naturally occurring food. Now the food itself, maize or beans or whatever, how can you make much more money off it? And so they've found a way to insert into the law in different countries around the world, a way in which people cannot now save seed or exchange seed or replant seed that they bought. So it becomes now a crime for an individual such as myself to be saving seed or exchanging with neighbors or fellow farmers, wherever they may be, or to replant seed that I may have purchased somewhere, or seed that has grown off my crops, that now replanting that now is illegal because it is somebody else's intellectual property. So now whatever occurred in nature, they took to a laboratory, messed around with it, and then decided that it is their intellectual property, and therefore thou shalt not use my stuff without giving me my dues, which is money. But over and above all that is just an attempt to control everything that is going on with the human body. Yes. So whatever is going to go into you in the form of a GMO crop, you do not know what it is. But because they're all interlinked, GMOs are interlinked with agrochemicals, are interlinked with pharmaceuticals. So there's this whole value chain, if you would, that they have created that ensures a certain series of success for them in terms of monetizing the human body via controlling nutrients and then non-nutrients, really, and then everything else that will happen subsequently as they continue to observe what happens with populations as they ingest those products. So there's active efforts.
So is there like a international body that does this as their remit, like like a private organization?
Convention. There's an international convention that was introduced called UPOV. It's called something about the protection of plant varieties. And it started in Europe and in the US, and then they found a way to introduce it into what they call developing nations.
It's the International Union for the Protection of New Varieties of Plants, UPOV. Yes.
So using the World Trade Organization, they managed to leverage every time they negotiate with less developed countries, so that those governments would put into law that it is illegal to save or exchange or replant seed, so that you can actually be arrested, even in some countries. And I saw Greenpeace running a campaign about this concerning Kenya. You can be arrested for actually reusing your own seed. And so it's a mess. So UPOV, of course, will protect companies like Syngenta and all those who are creating seed in their labs. So you can't just go and use their stuff, which is fine. I don't even want their stuff. Their stuff is weird.
Exactly.
As far as I'm concerned. But where I draw the line is now you're coming to my home, my village, and you're saying to me, that seed, which actually, like the other day, they found some millet which had been stored underground for I don't know how many 100 years in some part of Kenya. You're saying I can't use that seed that my great somebody.
Please save some of that for me.
I can't use it to feed my family. I can't use it to just take care of our basic needs. That if I do so, I am breaking some kind of strange law. It's really, really perverse what is going on. And so using UPOV, which is not even like, it's not part of what would be, and I hate these organizations, but part of,
we all should.
Globally endorsed organization that you can legally say, hey,
United Nations,
the UN, or it was the WHO, or what are the agricultural people called, whatever they're called. It's not one of them
organization.
Who people seem to like for whatever reason. It's just some guys with influence and clout sat down and decided that this would be a good idea, and then got some way to leverage the World Trade Organization and nations to agree to these terms. So if they have leverage over your country, they can convince you to insert into your laws the illegality of the saving or reuse of seed, so that because you're a signatory of UPOV, or so that you can become a signatory of UPOV. And there is no real benefit as far as I can tell, except maybe there was some other kind of trade deal that was going on behind the scenes that people thought, oh, this is great. And in signing that one, they sold off the legacy and the inheritance of people for generations to come. It's a mess.
I mean, you mentioned the idea of the use of indigenous seeds now being criminalized, or i.e., the seed I bought this season, I can't use it next season. So what they're invariably saying is to the local farmer in the countryside, in Kenya, or whatever part of Africa, before you put that seed in the land, you have to go to your government to go and say, oh, I have a set of seeds. Can I still use them?
From what Chioma is saying, it appears you can't even do that.
Or am I infracting on some protocol you guys have signed 10 years ago? You know,
I think it's worse than that, brother. I think the government comes to you.
Oh, so the government is actually policing their own population on behalf of commercial interest in the other part of the world.
Yes.
So, which brings me to the question. Usually, when farmers are aging and passing on, part of what they pass on are the seeds, the techniques that goes into tilling the land. So you're now saying following on from our conversation last week, one, they don't have the land. Now they can't even pass on seeds.
Yeah. Yes.
Please,
and this is
make
the
that
madness.
make sense.
It does not make sense. It's an insanity. Mankind has embraced an insanity, and they've added it to the list of insanities that they've embraced. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. But you see what they did, which is very clever, and it's evil. I'm not approving of it, but it's very smart. Is they just gradually made their way into these farmers' lives, using these agricultural extension officers, to give advice. We've come to counsel you on how to get the most out of your land, because you want to make more money, don't you? And so we're going to teach you how to do it. And then these are the better seeds that you can use. And so they started to introduce these hybrids that government organizations have been, culturing and growing in consultation with who knows which international body. And so now every season, farmers are finding that they actually do have to go and buy seed. So they've started getting used to it. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So they're kind of desensitized to the idea of having to purchase seed. The memory, the social and cultural memory of being independent from seed purchase is fading or has faded in certain areas of Africa. It just, it's become kind of the norm. Oh yeah, oh no, I'm so broke. What am I going to do? I have to take a
continuation of the colonization of the mind.
Exactly.
Right.
So farmers are taking loans to buy seed for this season's, planting. And so they're already now in shackles. So, if God favors them and the weather is good, they'll end up with a harvest, and then they'll be able to pay, certain loans off and whatever. After buying other inputs and begging the government to reduce the cost of, fertilizer, which is ruining their land in the first place. But, they'll beg, please reduce the cost of fertilizer instead of just using mulch or using manure to restore the health and the life of the soil. But they're buying these other things which are killing the soil, and then so their crops maybe make it, so now they can sell, and then they're conned by the middlemen, and so they end up barely breaking even, paying off their debts, and then the next season's planting comes and they have to take another loan. So you don't even have farmers who are necessarily free. And some of them also give into this game that's being played with the government in pricing, and so they hoard their harvest and they say to the government, we're not giving you until you improve the price.
Yeah.
And so it's not food has become not a conversation of health or community welfare or benefit. It's become another tool in capitalism's, arsenal of weapons
Exploitation
to
of people.
Yeah.
right, and to dehumanize people to the point where they're forgetting that food is actually a necessity. So perhaps the conversation about food should be held at a different level than that of money, kind of like healthcare. Money should not be that conversation that you're having. Education, if you're developing your nation, money, all these basic things. But then there we are,
Yeah.
insanity.
Yeah. I
It's
mean, what
as you
we're talking about is food imperialism. That's what it is. It's
exactly.
closing the loop.
Yeah.
The loop has been closed, because once you have people locked in and depending on food as well, then that's 100% imperialism, as Thomas Sankara said. Thomas Sankara, if nobody has ever seen that documentary, Thomas Sankara, the upright man,
That man.
in the very beginning, he says, if you want evidence of imperialism, look at your plate.
Just
If
look at your plate.
you import your food, I don't need to explain to you what imperialism is all about. So, sister, and we welcome you. We love you for the work you do. And I have to apologize for listeners who are listening to you and getting depressed by what. But it's good to know. No, listeners, it's good to know these things. That these are the challenges we need to fight. If you look at Nkrumah's book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, he's warning about that. He's saying, let's not surrender our food independence. And he wrote this book in 1965. So now, you know why the US sent an official letter of protest to Nkrumah, to Ghana's government when that book was published. Not only sent an official protest, they cut off aid to Ghana because of that book. Aid was $25 million, which today is worth more than $400 million.
Yes.
That's what they cut off when Nkrumah wrote that book. Okay, so that's 65. In the 80s, Sankara has complained about the same thing. How can we import our food and be that dependent? To his credit, and may he rest in peace, within 3 months, his country was food self-sufficient, independent. Fast forward today, African countries, many countries are going through hunger, starvation now. Why? Because we import $35 billion every year, $35 billion from food from the outside world. Think about that. This is money that should be going into our economies. Sister, you mentioned the issue of water as well. Remember, in Peru, water was privatized by a U.S. by a U.S. company. The government allowed a U.S. company to take control.
That doesn't even make sense when you say that.
Rainwater. Think about that. Even rainwater.
It doesn't even make sense.
It did not make sense. And then the people of Peru said, "This is the limit."
Yeah.
They came out to the streets, and people who haven't seen this documentary that details that, and it also covers Kenya, by the way, how this U.S. company came and took over production of corn in a part of Kenya. And then everybody could not use their seeds as well because the concession was given to the U.S. company. The documentary is called "The End of Poverty" with a question mark at the end by Philip Diaz. So he explains that. So what I'm saying is that what we're discussing here, you explained the World Trade Organization, the WTO, which enforces global trade, right? Is like a mafia organization, like the mafia getting together, creating an organization saying, okay, members, if in the past you engaged in bank robbery, going forward, bank robbery is now illegal. But for you who stole in the past, you can keep that money. And what do I mean by this? They have a rule that you are not allowed to subsidize your farmers. Think about that. Even though the United States spends $20
Brother
billion.
Alimadi, if you can please explain to our audience, if my grandpa is sitting in Kikoko or wherever it is, what is subsidize?
Subsidize is You know, they say the free market, right? In this capitalist country, they say everything works out by itself, demand and supply. They find they coincide, so there's no need for government intervention. That's what they say. That's the basis of capitalism, right? That's on paper. It's all nonsense. If they believed in that, there should be no farmers in the United States because farming is not cost effective in the United States, right?
True.
So,
True.
but they will not yield that because they understand food sovereignty. It's like, think about that, depending on another country to feed your people, right? So they won't yield that, even though they say officially, yes, capitalism, let the market work itself. They will not allow their farmers to become extinct. So they subsidize them. They give them money to beat the difference. You know, so in Kenya, farmers are making a loss, right? If it's in the United States, that loss, the difference, the government would make up for it. Say, okay, so you're going to lose what, 10,000 shillings this year? No, you won't. We will cut a check to you to cover that loss, 10,000. You're going to lose 20,000 shillings? No, we'll cut you a check for 20,000 to keep them in business, existing, and to keep them prospering.
So
but
to
the World Bank comes to Kenya and says, no, you cannot subsidize your farmers. If you do, we won't give you a World Bank loan. And let me make one final point, and then I would want some reaction from the sister. There's an economist, and now I forget his name, Nicholas Howard, a professor. People should Google him and look for African poverty on YouTube, and you'll see this lecture. And he's given an example where he said, finally, a brave African revealed the secret. He said, Malawi's Minister of Finance spilled the beans when he was forced to explain why there was famine one particular year in Malawi. He said, because the World Bank told us to burn the food stocks that we had in storage as a condition to get loan from the World Bank.
Loans, yeah.
I rest my case. So, sister, the floor is yours.
Hey, it's hard to be quiet and let you all talk while you say these things, and I'm like, but that doesn't make sense. But that doesn't make sense. But why? But so this is what's going on in my head. So, mwananchi, right? And I want to talk to that farmer. Kama wewe ni mkulima Kenya, halafu hujapata faida kutokana na mavuno yako. Nchi yako inaweza kukulipa, sivyo? Chioma, inaweza kukulipa ndio usiwe na hasara. Lakini World Bank wanasema la, nchi usiwalipe wakulima. Don't pay them. No, we're not going to give you a loan. Hatutawapatia loan. Mkilipa wakulima, you're not getting a loan, Kenya. So your leaders are being put in this awful situation where if there's staff in the government that needs to be supported by finance and they need that loan from the World Bank, but they cannot get that loan unless they accept that they will not pay you farmers. So they cannot take care of you. Because that's the condition this is the thing that I want the regular Kenyan, the regular African to get. These organizations that come appearing like they're helping you, they're really not helping you. Because if they were, they would not put conditions on these terms of aiding you. Right. There would be no
friendly
conditions.
Right. Yeah. And for our listeners who don't follow Kiswahili, the sister was simply explaining what I had just said in English. Okay.
Listen, I speak English all the time. For the listeners who don't speak Kiswahili, you'll be fine if I spoke for 1 minute to my Kenyan Swahili speakers and Tanzanian and Congo and East Africa in general.
Right. Yes. The floor is yours, Sister Chioma.
Yeah. So yes, to the point that Milton was making,
I know.
It's so bad you have to laugh, right?
I know.
It's really bad. And
they have us in a bind.
Let me tell you what is the worst part of all of this. It's not that African leaders are unaware of the machinations and the manipulations of the global system. They are fully aware. They know what's going on. They know that they're being played if you will. They know that they're being given the what is it called, the short end of the stick. They know that there is a game afoot, but because, and I'm going to use this word, because they have chosen to go the path of debt and to play into the hands of the people who are lending them money, supposedly lending them money, then they have to bend over and take it. Sorry for the graphic.
Yep.
Yeah. So what has happened is that they keep giving themselves over to this thing because they don't want to end up like many African leaders who were just suddenly
Disappeared.
made dead.
Yeah.
Right?
It's very
It's funny,
sad.
actually. I should not laugh, but again, it's so bad you laugh.
It's really tragic. But what's happening is that they're missing the point. Yes, we do have traitors in countries who are very willing to betray their nations to globalist agendas for some piece of land or some money or something or the other. But all in all, the citizens of countries in Africa are quite willing to fight for their own true independence if they are given the tools to do so. And they would gladly stand by any leader who genuinely sits down and tells them, listen, these people, they want to take our rights. They want to take our freedom by making us use, their money. And if we do that, that means we have to fire 5,000 people. If we do that, that means we're going to have to increase the price of fuel. If we do that, that means there isn't going to be any free primary school education. If we do that, this and this and this and this and this. And so what we are proposing is that forget building roads this year. What we would like us to do this year is work together to build our food reserves. But keep in mind, they might come to kill me and my family. So if they do that, please continue. Do you see what I'm saying?
Of course.
The liberation struggle is, it needs to actually start.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So, some people
And it
might
means
say
sacrifice. That's what you're
already,
saying. It means sacrifice, yeah.
It does. It means actual, genuine sacrifice and for real courage.
Right.
So whatever happened, like with the Kenya Land and Freedom Army in the forests and any other people, people who were just willing to die so that they could be set free. Unfortunately, they got played by the government that stepped into power because, it became a puppet government. But like what the heart and the spirit, of the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, for those who don't know what I'm referring to, they're being called the Mau Mau, but it's the Kenya Land and Freedom Army.
Right.
So for what they did, or for what people like Lumumba did, or Sankara, or whoever else had the genuine will to liberate their people and set them free from neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism, that heart is what has to be restored to the people.
Absolutely.
Because what's happening is we're just gradually, tightening the shackles on our necks, on our arms, on our feet, ourselves.
Our stomachs too, now that they're going for food.
Right. Step by step. And, the middle class is there saying, yes, but this makes sense. Why? Because they read it in a textbook. Not because they've stopped to look around the environment and ask themselves, hang on a second, where is all the food that we used to have when we were children?
Are you coming for the intellectuals, Chioma?
We have to start. So
no, really.
Rattle some cages, because these are the guys who actually have the ability to voice this issue to those who are in power. They call it power. But those are the conversations.
Right.
But the thing is that we have to start somewhere, and they have to start by acknowledging to themselves that there is no real liberty that they're enjoying in their lives. What they're actually experiencing and encountering is increasing amounts of constraints, and that's what's happening. So whereas before, there was a wide variety of starches that you could consume in the market, now you're kind of just consuming maize or a derivative of maize, wheat or a derivative of wheat,
That's just the thought of it is giving me a stomach upset.
So rice.
And more than that, actually.
White potato, Irish potato, Or if you didn't notice, that the sweet potatoes changed color suddenly, then now you go online and find out why are they yellow now and they used to be white before.
Are you telling me my grandma's white sweet potato that you'd open and it has a nice white middle is gone?
There's
No,
still some around,
it used
but
to
there's
be
some other
red. It
ones.
used to be red on the outside.
Yes,
It used to be
but
red on
white
white
the outside.
inside.
inside.
Now
It's changed. Now they're
white
yellow.
inside. Now it's
So they
yellow.
flipped
Yeah.
the.
Yes,
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
want to give you vitamin A. I mean, you ignorant people don't know how to take care of yourselves and eat vitamin A. I mean, come
I
on.
forgot that bit.
You
Yeah,
know what I mean,
thank you for
right?
reminding me.
You're not ignorant. You know what I mean? It's
I
just a
get
mess,
you.
and they're doing it with matoke. They're coming after matoke. They want to introduce, vitamin A infused matoke, and they're going after cassava. I believe somewhere in, I think in Nigeria, they're working on some kind of project. It's not.
Oh.
It's not funny at all.
I
But
know, Adesoji.
because for these guys, it makes sense for you to be able to commercialize a small, controllable amount of food groups. So that's what they're trying to do, is just show you how versatile wheat is. I mean, you can have pasta, you can make it into chapatis, you can do mandazi, you can make chin chin, you can do, but that's just wheat. It's amazing, and it'll just take care of you and your whole family. The whole week you can have a wheat product, bread, all that cake and everything. It's so great and glamorous. Meanwhile, the wheat that they're giving you is bleached,
Yeah.
has had everything good stripped off it, has been sprayed to death with glyphosate. And then they have decided that because it's low in nutrients, which they stripped out of it in the first place, now they are fortifying your wheat flour. And you don't know what they're saying this is vitamin A from where?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the seed already had the vitamin A and then you took it out, what have you now put in to call vitamin A? And guys are just going to saying it's fortified. The other day I went to the supermarket and I saw the cooking oil fortified. I'm like,
How can you
What does
fortify?
it even mean?
red oil will work for me, thank you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But everybody is lauding these as advancements and developments. If we're going to catch up with the West, these
the
are the
thing.
things that we have to do. Let's industrialize, but they're not talking about the nature of the industrialization that must
And the
take
impact.
place. And so they're open to anything.
The irony is that industrialization has created food deserts in the US. A bunch of cities have been named, and you can go Google it for those in Kenya wondering about this, or anywhere else in Africa. For those cities where they've built and overbuilt, they've taken away the access to cheap food, affordable, not cheap necessarily, affordable and fresh food. So that's what this industrialization, if that's what Africa wants to do, that's what it gets you. It creates a food desert. But Chioma, brother Adesoji was speaking to you about UPOV, or rather the organization. Yes, you did mention UPOV. Adesoji, were you done with that line of questioning?
Yes, I was also going to. Yeah, I mean, it's food, as Thomas Sankara often says. You are what you eat. So if you're feeding your body toxins, guess what's going to come out on the other end? And then, which brings me to this question, actually, the health implication of all this toxins in the average African. And when I say average, I don't mean that in terms of size, in terms of means.
Yeah.
If we don't have a viable healthcare system and we're eating things we don't understand, what do you see in terms of the long run impact for this sort of ingestion of quote unquote fortified foods?
Okay.
Before Sister responds to that, can I add to what you just asked? The same question. No, it's the same. It's just I meant complementing the question. Walter Rodney wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa in 1972. Think about that. And in that book, there's a chapter where he analyzes the impact of the elimination of different types of foods, indigenous foods that we had in African company, the physical impact. There's the book. Everybody should get that. And you'll find that he was writing about what we are discussing today in the 21st century. Because he said by eliminating the variety under colonialism, you started developing kwashiorkor, all these other diseases that we never had, because we had the richest variety of foods, which is what the sister has been emphasizing on as well. So I just wanted to bring that out.
Because you can also see what they swapped in exchange for what was nutritious and beneficial. They swapped in fast foods. And if you could get brand names into your country, then oh my goodness, you really hit it. And let me tell
You've
you,
arrived.
can I confess? I used
Please
to believe,
confess.
we are arriving. Wow. Look,
When you saw
KFC.
McDonald's and when what are they called now in Nairobi? I
KFC.
forgot.
KFC and
Uh-huh.
Burger King and
You were
Domino's
in line
and
ordering
whatever. It's
your
like,
3-piece chicken.
hey, look at Africa. We're being recognized. How amazing. Because that comes from the mindset of inferiority. Until they say we're good enough to eat their poison, we are not good enough. I mean, see the warped thinking that enters somebody's head at some point. It's terrible. Because with now people like KFC, they bring in their potatoes from Egypt. And as someone was proudly bragging, oh, we've already had GMOs in the country if you didn't know. Because with the, they look for a certain type of potato and the potato has to be perfect. But like someone was saying, I watched a video where he was saying, what they do is they engineer out the information that the potato is giving you. Because when you're peeling a potato, you notice a black spot. The potato is telling you this particular section, we had issues when we were growing. So just remove, continue with the rest. We managed the rest. Or if it's green, it's like poison, throw it away.
Yeah.
But now these geniuses went and decided, no, we want the perfect potato. And so they silenced the information the potato is giving. So people are just ingesting. I'm eating this. Hey, look at me eating. I mean, I had fast food. Wow, great. And, as if we needed to go back to look at America. I mean, America had the whole obesity. Am I still on? Because I'm feeling like I'm frozen.
We lost you a little bit there.
Have you lost my camera?
We can hear you though. The video is.
Yeah, we lost.
Yeah, I think my battery has gone off. Sorry, let me try and sort that out.
We can hear you though. Yeah.
Okay, let me keep talking while I figure out this camera thing.
Yeah, it's ironic because I'm also about to
the
face
brothers
the
and I
battery
can
issue.
chat.
So.
Yes, while you sort that out, Chioma, the brothers and I can chat quickly as you do that.
Well,
Go on.
I've got my battery issue as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
you have a battery issue as well, Alimadi?
Yeah.
I think I
So
do.
I can keep talking. I've sent my SOS.
So you guys have not. You fed your.
They're not prepared for the liberation movement. These ones with their battery issues.
You fed your computers
the liberation.
some GMOs.
I said that SOS because I can try and figure it out, but
this is what happens when you eat fast food, Chioma.
It's a problem. Right. So there we are, fast food.
Yes.
So there's an increase of that. So you remove what is good, you bring in what is not good, call the what is not good good, and then advertise it so that it's aspirational. Shame on you advertising agencies. So everyone is like, if I don't get KFC, my life is over. And so now everyone's rushing around trying to figure out how they're going to waste a good amount of money, which you can use for other things, like a good market day in an organic farm, farm outlets. So they're wasting that money on one meal, which is not nutritionally beneficial in any way, shape, or form. So to the issue of health, we spoke to a doctor by the name of Dr. Mokaya, and he is big in the movement of organic food and natural health and natural immunity and so on and so forth. Medical doctor, top line training and everything. And he was
Is he in Kenya?
Yes, he's a Kenyan, and I don't know if he's in Kenya right now, if he's still in Uganda, but either way, he's reachable. And he was explaining to us, and I can share the link to that video with you later,
yes, please,
about the consequences of, for instance, using agrochemicals on our food. And you can also find other information that's coming out. So let me start with one of our farming communities in Kiambu in Kenya, there's an increasing amount of hypospadias and epispadias cases in newborn boys. And what does that mean? That means that the urethra terminates early in the penis, either early and on top or early and on the bottom.
What does that
mean? And so they're trying to blame the women because the women are supposedly overweight, but actually it's linked to the use of, what it is called, herbicides and pesticides.
So that leads to sterilization, like no more producing children, right?
Now. And so he was emphasizing that it's not only about cancer, that these things are, and cancer is an issue. And as we can see, there's an epidemic of cancer clinics and hospitals that has been, hitting and affecting Kenya lately. And I call it an epidemic because it's a problem. A hospital is not a healthcare solution. Prevention is a solution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So-
And we actually look forward to having our dear sister Patricia Rodney, who's working on this, speak on that in upcoming show. But go on, Chioma, sorry.
No problem. So he was pointing out that yes, there's cancer, there's obesity, and all the related things like what they're calling lifestyle diseases, as if it's an approval, a stamp of approval.
Yeah,
So
lifestyle.
wow, look at me, I have hypertension.
Like a Gucci bag.
I must be so advanced. Thanks. I have hypertension. Oh no, hypertension. I have hypertension and diabetes. Really? Oh my goodness, I've got all three included.
Yeah.
That is
my
how they-
heart is
that
about
is
to
how-
fail. Oh, it's so
Yep.
terrible. What are you going to do? I will drink beetroot juice. So now I remembered that beetroots exist, which I also hear have another side to them. But it's one hot mess.
Yes.
So, so we have that, and then we also have increasing cases of infertility, not only in men but in women. And if you look at the U.S., who Museveni thinks we should be pursuing, the U.S. is also enduring or suffering under increased cases of male infertility.
Right.
And all of these things can be tied back to how the food is produced, what is used on food when it is in the farm, how it is then processed when it is processed thereafter, because the body is not getting what it needs. And all of these scientists in all of their labs know exactly what it takes for the human body to thrive. Therefore, they know what to take away in order to ensure that the human body is not thriving.
Yeah. It's
Which is-
remarkable.
yes,
And
It's
a
as
person like
simple
you,
as that. Yes.
a person like you're seen as wanting to take Africa backward.
Yes.
Right.
I've heard my fellow Africans charge me with that. Yeah. I have been told that I'm taking people backwards by fighting this new trend of GMOs. But go ahead, Chioma.
Yeah, no, that's basically it. So basically, overall health outcomes are poor. They're increasingly poor over time. But apparently, you are developed if you have to go for dialysis.
Right.
I mean, seriously, guys.
Modern diseases, Western diseases.
It's like when they say that you are not credit worthy until you have had debt. What
Imagine
kind of
that, the
stupid
irony.
reasoning is this? Yeah, I mean, I don't understand.
I think that's a
it.
great example. I love
That is a
example.
good analogy.
Yeah, but listen, I see the time is dwindling. Maybe for listeners there who are now scratching their head, trying to pull out
And we
their
have
hair,
a couple who are.
yeah,
There's some
maybe
interesting
the
comments.
sister can give us some hope. Please tell us there are more
Hold
people.
on, before
there are
she
more
gives
people
us
like
hope.
you out there.
Before
doing
You don't
she
this.
want
gives
hope
us
yet.
hope,
I'm trying to figure out this camera of mine.
Chioma,
Please be
before you
talking.
give up hope, or rather give us hope, I should say.
Yes.
And as you figure out your camera,
Yeah.
I'm going to read a couple of messages from the chat, just bringing the audience
Yes,
to the conversation. But also, I still want us to speak about the damage before we get to the hope, so that we can make it clear we have identified the problem, and then now talk about the hope and the solution. So once I mention this, Brother Alimadi, if you can go to your question to our dear sister. But Karen L says that she is losing hope. She's honestly losing hope when she sees what she's seeing and she hears what she's hearing. And Mr. K says to Karen that we are resilient and there are freedom fighters all around addressing the issue, which goes to what Brother Alimadi was trying to bring up. So let's ask Brother Alimadi, please speak to the question that you have next, and then let's talk about these freedom fighters and this hope that still is here for us.
Oh yeah, definitely. I want to hear that hopefully, and if they're not, I think it's going to be one of our missions in every show. We have to bring up Sister Chioma's name and tell people how to link with her so we can spread this consciousness giving platform.
So
make
that's
sure,
Msingi. Msingi, I'll write the name there, but yes, we will mention that.
Yeah,
Go on.
that you have more more people involved in this, and people respond. People appreciate it. Look at the authentic love that the people in Burkina Faso still have for Sankara, even today. Even though they're in a bit of a mess right now, people still yearn back to that era. Such a long time ago. Many of them were not born, since the country is very young, like the rest of Africa. But one day they will come back to that system that Sankara had introduced. So we need to support people engaged on the front lines, such as yourself. So please tell us there are a few more who else are out there. And if not, we'll follow you until more join you.
Sorry, was that addressed to me? Because I kind of
Yes.
had a moment of...
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, that
so
is to
please
you.
repeat the question if you
That
don't
is to
mind.
you. We want to know, as we
Apologize.
said, we love the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
And we know this is the path really to Africa's liberation. You know, many of us are engaged in challenging the World Bank and IMF and putting pressure on our leaders who sign up to these loans and accept those conditions that impoverish and kill our people. And by the way, now that I just remembered, listeners, there's a lecture by Rodney called Crisis in the Periphery, Africa and the Caribbean. That's on YouTube as well. And he literally calls the IMF, I'm paraphrasing, but literally calls them bloodsuckers, He says, they take your blood for something like a pound of bread or something like that. So we're engaged in that fight. But this is actually, I believe, the biggest fight. Because without food independence, you cannot do anything else. So the question is, are there others like yourself engaged in this very worthy struggle? Because we want, obviously, the numbers to grow. So in that sense is what I would say that would give us more hope and the listeners who are listening.
There are, and thank God there are many courageous people who are pushing back. For instance, there is a group called Food Sovereignty Ghana, who are actively fighting against the UPOV law being passed in Ghana, and taking all their leaders to task as strongly as possible. And they're doing amazing work. They're making headway, or at least in terms of publicity, they're gaining ground. Gaining awareness. Not only that, we have organic consumers associations. This Dr. Mokaya, who I mentioned, is actually one of the main players in, and they're working together to put together networks of farmers in Africa who are willing, ready, and interested in doing things the correct way, safely, producing food safely for people. And they provide training, they provide tools and support and even certification if it's needed, so that people can be able to know that the food that they're purchasing is actually grown through a process that was pre-approved by people who have people's interests at heart. There's a gentleman we know of, I'm not sure if you've heard of him, by name of Rutendo Matinyarare. He is Zimbabwean by birth. You know him?
Oh,
yes.
That's troublemaker number one.
He's got a lot going on. He's amazing. Yes. So he was in South Africa. I don't know if he's moved permanently back to Zimbabwe, but either way, he sort of traverses both. And he's been active not only in pushing against sanctions against Zimbabwe, but also in pursuing the issue of food safety and finding ways to produce food safely and sell food safely, especially to those who are interested, including managing the issue of seeds. So like heirloom seeds which are actually indigenous, original, and still have life in them. And so it's not just these individuals that I've mentioned, there are more people out there. So organic food producer networks exist across the country. As do people who are actually trying to find remedies, natural remedies, plant-based remedies to many of these ills that people have, unfortunately, encountered in their bodies because of the lifestyle choices they made. And you know what is really sad and painful about this whole thing that's going on with people's food and the farming system, the farming process, is that many of the farmers do it from the place of trust. The government has our best interests at heart. Therefore, they've given us these seeds, they've given us this fertilizer, and they've given us this spray to use so that we can be successful. So they bought the line. And the people who know better are not helping them. And there are people in the farming community who know better and they're not helping. But there are those in the farming community who also know. Like there's a lovely lady, a Kenyan lady called Sylvia Miloyo Kuria. She's pioneering a whole organic food retail market thing in Kenya. She goes around training farmers in what to do, how to grow their stuff. And then she's created an outlet where people can actually buy their produce. Because for many farmers, but if I do this and it costs me more and takes more time, how am I assured that I'm going to get some kind of return? So she is providing an answer to that question. There are people, and the thing is that these people are not like strange, or they didn't wake up and were bitten by some radioactive spider and then they got superpowers and started to do. What happened is it is born from passion. Like for Sylvia, it came from the place of wanting what was best for her children. So as she took care of her children and she noticed they were improving, she was like, but what about other people? How do I help them as well? And so she started pushing for that. She's, fought because it's not been easy, but she pushes and she pushes every day. And on the days when she feels like giving up, she's got a support network that encourages her. It's not easy at first to begin to be the transformative force in your area of responsibility or mandate or understanding. But if you have a vision that is clear, it is worth it. Because many of the people who are freedom fighters, like for real freedom fighters, they end up dead. So I'm just letting you know, it's going to cost you.
There's a cost.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we lost Sister Chioma for a minute there, but
It's frozen for a minute.
yeah, it's frozen.
I wanted to tell her that what she was talking about.
I think she's back.
Oh,
she's
here
back.
she is.
Yeah.
Oh, that was me, right? Okay.
you froze for a second.
In my whole tirade did I?
The threat to life when you're doing this work. Mm-hmm.
Yes, there is a genuine threat because there are people who are keen on protecting the establishment.
That's right.
And because they are getting some kind of gain from
silver,
it.
yeah.
Now you can't transform every traitor. There are people who are just determined to selfishly gain despite what harm it causes. And it's political, it's in education, it's in food, it's whatever. They don't care. It's about themselves. But you can get enough people to form a community that is stable and safe and that can actually support and sustain you. So it's just about committing to start, because that's also how we even started doing all these videos and the magazine articles and so on. Like many people don't know, because some of the information we came across it and we're like, how did we not know this? And what it did was, for us, it informed lifestyle changes. We're like, okay, we're cutting this out of our diet and we're introducing this very deliberately. When we have the resources, that's what we're going to do. And we're like, okay, so what about the other people who don't know? We're like, okay, I have a feeling we are responsible for starting to speak. Maybe somewhere along the way, someone else who is more able, to reach more people will pick up on this thread and be able to explode it beyond what we are able to do. But
we will connect.
One person will reach one.
Yeah.
Or the collaboration.
Right?
Or we will connect and collaborate.
So
Yourself, Msingi Afrika, Kumbukeni, Tunacheki, we all must start now uniting these efforts and work as a united front against these people who are trying to destroy our humanity. Yes.
And the collaboration from our governments too. As the sister was speaking, I wanted to look up this because I remember this story. I found it. This is in Uganda's main private paper called the Daily Monitor.
Yeah.
The headline, this is from Sunday, October 2nd, 2021. Counterfeit seed keeps Ugandan farmers poor. So these seeds supplied through the government to farmers, and they happen to be fake seeds. So think about that. And obviously, if the farmers were using their own indigenous seeds, they would have been fine. It's tragic.
Wow.
I was thinking
as
Sister Chioma was talking. Brother Alimadi, are you done?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned that it will become a crime. First of all, there's something when we were getting to know each other and when we reached out to you, talk about the free trade agreements. I would like our our fellow brothers and sisters to understand that, please quickly just talk about the free trade agreements and how it's related to the GMOs and UPOV and this control and exploitation of African people as far as food supply goes.
Yeah, we
is
touched
that
a
for
little
me?
bit on that.
Yes,
on the
Chioma,
WTO.
please. Yes.
Because I'm hoping someone else who might be more conversant will handle it. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert.
It's the same
That's
thing.
another thing.
It's the same thing. The
Yeah.
WTO arrangements, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the so-called free trade.
Because-
There's nothing free about free trade. So,
That's
they
exactly what
have
I'm
a
gonna say.
concept in economics that says you have to take advantage of your competitive advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
True.
So,
true.
the so-called rich countries,
Economics of scale.
exactly, they have industries. So let them focus on making cars, planes, pharmaceuticals. Africa, you focus on agriculture. And then we
Food
trade,
production.
free trade, right?
Mhm.
You import manufacturers, we import food. It's all baloney. It ends
So-
up, we are importing cars.
Coming
and
to
we're
an
importing
agreement
food.
as to who does what,
There's no agreement.
but making sure that
Yes.
you are on the side of advantage. You're the one making the most out of this agreement.
Exactly. That's where the
I mean-
WTO rules come into it, World Trade Organization.
I mean,
Yeah.
the tenets of the World Bank and the IMF is simply saying, okay, Africa continues to remain a resource market for the westernized economies. Whatever it is, we can squeeze out of them. And right now, we're about to tell you what you're going to plant, when you're going to plant it, how you're going to plant it, and what can go into the ground. Oh, by the way, you don't even own the land. Very good. You can come and work for a fee.
Yeah.
So can you see how all of this ties into what we've been talking about so far? When we first of all started, we talk about the media, which is the projection, the image of what Africa is to the world. And in fact, what Africa is to themselves. Because if you don't divide the house, how are you going to get to control them? And then the land comes into play. The land, Britain, by its very colonial policy, was the fact that, okay, you know what? We're going to bring our population in. You are going to have to move aside. And once you do that, what do we then do? One funny thing Sister Chioma was speaking to, and I was laughing, but I wrote it down and I just remembered now, was when the Europeans came in, they didn't even know how to farm.
No, they didn't.
And one of the key things they did was stop the Africans from competing with them. So how do they do that? They strip them off the land and then tax them using vagrant laws, i.e. if you're just standing and loafing around, we'll tax you. Where do you get the money to pay that fine? You go and work for the European farmer. When he says work, he says plant. You, in your mindset, is like you think he understands what planting means. You go and plant as you normally would. Who gets the yield? The guy who doesn't even know how to plant
Bwana.
a corn. There you go. And now we're
Bwana mheshimiwa.
reversing, and now we're reversing the whole gambit again. But this time with a new generation.
But the other thing to add also, they also banned some crops. So this is nothing new. During the colonial era, they said you are not allowed to grow this,
food crops,
this, this, and this. In French colonies, they were actually imprisoned if they grew something which was not approved by the colonial regime. Just think about that.
And then
here's
they did this whole thing where they made it look like if you grew the things that they liked, you're so civilized. And the problem is that they had brainwashed people into wanting to be called civilized. And so
And these
people were
Africans are proud, right?
like, what do you mean? They're eating Irish potato. Irish.
You're still eating millet. What's wrong with you?
It's so painful.
Backward foods.
Really painful. I don't know.
You're making me intentionally, when I visit my parents, intentionally, I will say, let's go back to that old food. I don't want to see a potato on my plate. Millet every day.
I mean,
sorry.
even what you just said now is, if you really look at it, who is aware that majority of what we now call cash crops are not even indigenous to Africa? Cocoa was introduced into Ghana, I think, 1896 by the British. So they tested the land. What's it called? Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria. Western part of Nigeria, to be specific. The only places where this plant will grow. And so when it did grow, guess who gets the market? They first of all set up what is called the marketing board. The only people who can buy it are these marketing boards at a set price. So the farmer, beginning at the start of the year, is working towards that budget. If it doesn't meet up, or if its produce are decided not to be fit for market, guess what happens? That entire harvest season is gone.
Yeah, that's only part of it. The marketing board also did not give the farmers the world price of the commodity. So if cocoa is selling, I'm just picking a random number, at 100 pounds per ton overseas, the farmer would probably get 10 pounds instead of, at the most 25. And the colonial regime would keep 75%. So that's daylight robbery for years and years and years,
Basically, everything you're describing is still the norm in global relationships. And everything that we're talking about in relation to food or UPOV is the norm across every single thing that can be called a sector. And even what you would call free trade areas or whatever, they were only set up not for the convenience of, like, for instance, any free trade areas that may exist in Africa were not set up for the convenience of Africans, but more for the convenience of multinational corporations operating in these areas so that they can be able to get their raw materials as easily and conveniently as they needed. There is nothing that has been done. I mean, like when you talked about, just the general manipulation of realities, that's what it is. There's nothing that has been done that is, let's make sure that Africa is thriving. Everything is to ensure that Africa remains as subservient, as needy, as weak, and as possible, so that it just kowtows to the needs of whoever it is pulling the strings somewhere else. And the unfortunate thing is that, I'm sorry, the middle class again, who should understand these things, have become the defenders of the prison system that actually enslaves them and their children. And so many people, when they discover the things that we're sharing are actually true, are horrified, but sometimes they're angry with you as the messenger. One person yelled at us the other day because we were coming against GMOs, and why this person was trying to get some kind of benefit from the system, and they were not able to access it. Now, the whole way that we live in the world is all upside down. Because what has happened is, once we embraced capitalism, we took away room for us to be people. So everything has now become about the pursuit of coin. If you're chasing coin, then you don't have time to look at the face of your brother or your sister to the left or the right of you to see if they have need. Because your pursuit is to gain for self. It's not really about how do I then now turn around and become beneficial to those who are around me. People will pause for a breath maybe when they've hit $1 million USD or 100 million, whatever it is, and then say, hey, now I have so much, maybe I should help somebody. But that was never the point of it. The point of community is to have a common unity as we move towards a goal that is beneficial for the entirety. And the challenge with what they've done by labeling things capitalism, socialism, whatever other isms they've done, is that it's taken away room for people to just remember that their neighbor is hungry.
Right.
You'll attract some kind of label.
Yeah.
But there has to be room for compassion.
It's a form of demonization, actually, really.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's really terrible. And so if we continue to live in this structure that the world has set for itself, then we're doomed, because UPOV is now protected by what society has deemed to be the legal system. And they've given it their stamp of approval because they say society, after all, needs order. And this order is enforced by the legal system. And so as long as you write it on a paper and somebody signs it, then everybody who even didn't know about it is bound by it.
Right.
But it's okay because it keeps things in order.
Yeah.
But we have to be brave enough to check every level of society and see what is governing it and what's holding it together. And that's why when I said earlier, whatever is your area of mandate, because it's not necessarily that you have a strength or an interest in the area of food or agriculture or even media, but maybe law is your specialty and you have a way of sussing out all the sneaky little, clauses, in
Caveats.
international agreements. Yes, and you can expose them to people like, Kumbukeni and tell them, hey guys, by the way, here's
We
one
invite
thing.
you to, yes.
Right. In the area of health, here's what's happening and what can happen in the case of another pandemic, which they're playing around with, or they've already gotten people to sign up to because they used fear as a tool. In the area of agriculture, this is the thing. And so law is key because people have decided that they want to bind things by law. And the law that they're using is not necessarily moral. It's just legal.
Yeah.
And
we need
that's
to
a
remind
real
them
problem. Right.
that at one time, even slavery was legal. You see,
Exactly.
So just
Exactly.
because it's the law
doesn't mean it's right.
Yes.
Right. And it also depends on who's making that law. So if a criminal is making a law, that's questionable. So we are at 10 after the hour or 12 after the hour. So I'm going to bring in our community members. We have someone from the audience to speak with us, speak with you, Chioma. We have Brother Ikemba. He is with We Charge Colonialism, Brother Ikemba, that's right?
That is correct.
Right.
Hello.
On YouTube, another fellow African that is doing the necessary work on We Charge Colonialism on YouTube.
Wow.
And he is in community with us, and we were speaking about you coming in to speak about this subject, and he mentioned that in some work that he was doing, he has done a little research on GMOs. So I'll let Brother Ikemba speak to you, Chioma. Go ahead,
Okay.
Ikemba.
Okay, yes. So thank you for having me. Appreciate you bringing me onto this platform. Yes, conversation that we had in regards to my research on GMOs. It was actually for a paper in my graduate program, and I was looking at the history of GMOs. And I came across a case. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jacobarty versus Diamond case. And that was in the 70s. And in this case, this is where the problem really started, because in this case, they took it to the Supreme Court. They basically genetically modified this organism in the lab, and they wanted to patent it. But the patent office wouldn't patent it because the patent guidelines said you cannot patent life. But they took it to the Supreme Court, and the short story of the long story is that the Supreme Court, higher court, sided with Jacobarty and said that you're able to patent life as long as it's not a newborn baby. And so this was in the 70s, 79, I think the case concluded. But then in the 80s, and particularly in the 90s, this is where the GMOs really exploded and became $1 billion business. Now, so to my question though, with the GMOs, I really don't, I might be alone in this, but I don't see the issue with just the GMOs by itself. For me, it's the commercialization, it's capitalism. Because if you look at the history, human beings always artificially select, not always, but 10,000 maybe years ago, we was artificially selecting plants and foods, and a lot of the foods that, not a lot, but bananas, watermelons, there's some fruits and vegetables that we selected and breeded a certain way, and it looks a lot different than it did maybe 200, 300 years ago. But for me, it's the commercialization. It's the capitalism with the advent of these genetically modified organisms. That now, what's going to happen is the people, these companies, they don't care how healthy these foods are. And so, they could be feeding us poison as long as, well, they are feeding us poison, right? As long as they're making billions of dollars, because this is $1 billion, probably $1 trillion business. So how do we reverse this? What are some solutions? I know y'all was addressing a lot of these things, but if you was to talk to people and like some practical things that we can do, because with capitalism, it seems like there's really no reverse unless we do something about capitalism.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll let sister unless you're not done with the question, Ikemba.
Well, that's really it. Like, what are some practical things that we can do within the social system to kind of like
so we'll have Sister Chioma answer, and we need to let her go because she has a family to care for, and this is the life we live, right? We have different things happening in our lives. So we thank you very much for being with us, Chioma. We thank you very much for the work you're doing. We will continue this work together. But as you quickly answer that, and then once she does and we let her go back to be with her family, then we can continue the conversation amongst ourselves. Stay with us, Ikemba. Yes, go ahead.
And really, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this platform. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you, Brother Ikemba. I see what you're saying, like you don't really see an issue with the GMOs. The trouble with the GMOs, as Dr. Mokaya explained to us, is it's basically a Frankenstein seed. They have modified the nature of the seed and therefore modified the nature of the plant. So it is a new thing entirely. It's not like with hybridization, which you were describing, where people, select for certain features, like how I think it was the Dutch who selected for the color orange in carrots, or how slowly from wild mustard you eventually get cauliflower and broccoli and curly kales or whatever, which are strange enough in themselves because I don't know what you're getting. But GMOs is the DNA of the thing that actually has been affected, and it is so that it can withstand poison. So it can be bathed in poison. Every other plant around it will die, and the thing is like, yo, bring it on, bring some more, and then it keeps going. Which is quite bizarre. So whatever you're putting in you, they will say very conveniently, there are no scientific reports
Side effects.
which can address the issue of what
Eat all the germs you want.
in your body. It's so convenient. So you're like, okay, I can't really get an answer in terms of how it's going to affect my health from a scientific point of view. Now, because that's another structure that society has accepted, legality and then science. They hide behind it as conveniently as they can. But what can we do? If they are trying to nudge people in a specific direction, everyone must, what we always encourage people to do at Msingi Afrika is just stop first and understand what's going on. Don't rush, with the flow or agree for them to threaten you or intimidate you into making a choice now by force. You have to decide. Understand why people are being driven in a specific direction. What exactly is the end result of that? What are the options that are available to you? So there are people who start community gardens. I think in the US, I see an increase of community gardens where people are growing things that they know are beneficial to them. And they're sharing these or selling these in areas so that people are able to actually boost their health. We are encouraging people to truly find ways to save as much of their indigenous seeds as they can.
Yes, please.
In Africa, in the Caribbean, wherever else you can find heirloom seeds, indigenous seeds, nothing hybrid. Hybrid cannot really support you beyond one season and you don't really know what else is up with them. But whatever was original to the land, because it can still be found somewhere, I'm completely convinced. My husband tells me about plants in Nigeria and I'm like, what is that? He's like, how is it not in Kenya? I said, I don't know, bring it here, we'll plant it, let it proliferate, it's fine. But save the seeds. Save them, save them, save them. That's the first priority. Keep them somewhere safe, find out what it takes to preserve a seed. You know how they've got that seed bank in, what's that cold place? Whatever that cold place.
Ireland.
Thank you.
Yes.
Or Iceland. Right, so they've got their seed bank. Find out what it takes to preserve seeds so that it remains in optimal state so that it can be replanted. When you travel to different parts of the world, see if you can find seed there and harness it. Find networks of people, encourage them to save seed. When possible, start to exchange. And this conversation does not only have to take place among Africans.
Yes.
There are communities in South America who are also very, very conscious of the land and conscious of its value. There are Native Americans who are conscious of the land, conscious of seed, and conscious of value. People who respect life. Those are the people who you need to network with. You find them anywhere from Japan to, where is that called? Alaska. You will find them. Exchange seed. We need to diversify plant life across the world again, because it has been just decimated unnecessarily by all sorts of irresponsible lifestyles. So plant the seed. If they're insisting that the only thing that you can buy if you want a wheat product is something that has been baked in glyphosate, change your diet.
Okay.
You don't have to buy what they're selling you.
Sister, I was going to echo that as well. I was going to jump on the brother's question and say maybe one of the solutions could be boycotts as well. Boycott certain foods.
Absolutely.
Although then you have to be looking behind your back all the time if you start that movement. But I think it's critical.
Because you can do a silent boycott. You know, not the ones people like to go to the streets and put up placards and stuff like that. And that's useful for what it's useful for. But you can also mobilize communities quietly.
Yes.
And just suddenly no one is buying white bread, brown bread, because they know where it came from. At least like in the US, you seem to have ways to trace where the food was grown and how it was grown. Those things, use them now to your advantage. Don't buy that bread. Right. Buy the one that you know is safer, or figure out how to make it yourself.
Make your bread.
If you can source the grain, you don't have to use wheat. If that one has been glyphosated to death, look for buckwheat or some other thing that you can use to make bread. They can even make millet bread. Use teff, make flatbreads. If you can, avoid what they're trying to feed you. Don't use canola oil, don't use soy products, because those ones, you know, they've GMO'd them to the hilt. So stay away from that. If you really like soy, try and figure out where you can get heirloom seeds and then grow your own and start to, you know, create your products from that, if it really is beneficial to your health. The type of oils that you use, you have to be careful about them. Do you even have to use oil in your cooking? You don't. There are many ways in which you can produce healthy, delicious food without using their oils. So protect yourself, protect your family as much as possible. Because there's so many things that are contaminated, you don't know what's contaminated with what. But whatever you have control of, take control of and manage to the greatest extent possible. And I'm not talking about being paranoid. No. I'm talking about wisdom. I'm talking about discernment. I'm talking about being prudent in the steps that you take. It's just media will bring up something and they'll try and drive you in some kind of frenzied state. Say, fine, if Ukraine cannot export wheat again, we don't have to eat wheat. It's not dead.
I'm glad you mentioned that one.
You know, right? It's like sweet potato is food. Thank you. Cassava is food. Yam is food.
And arrowroots. I miss those.
Arrowroots is food. So those are some of the things that I would say. And then just talk about these things. And I'm serious about not necessarily going loud, because sometimes when you go loud, people kind of try to mess it up.
Yes.
Yeah. So
can you repeat that part, please, again? The loud
this
part.
is not necessary, you know.
My brothers
always come for me, but go ahead.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
You have to go. Tell us your contact. Listeners need to know how to get in touch with you.
Share information about Msingi that you would like our audience to know, please, quickly, as you head out. You have a campaign that you're running with
Mchanga. We have a crowdfunding.
And what is that link? I can quickly type it in here.
Do you have? I think we sent it to you, but
it is in
the flyers. We'll share it with them. We'll share it with them.
Okay, I will also ask Samuel to send it as well as I
once you step away, Samuel can get on the chat and just put it in the chat right now with the audience that we have here. Asante.
Yeah, because how we started Msingi was just on the basis of love. We have to tell as many people as much truth as possible, as quickly as possible. It did not depend on resources. Resources we didn't have. At times, there was no food, but the magazine had to go out. A video had to be done. And we're like, you know what? If we don't tell people then we die with this information. What use was the life that we had?
Correct.
So it takes that level of sacrifice. Eventually, you know, some people would be like, hey, you guys, man, how can we support you? And we got some help along the way. It hasn't been easy, but let me tell you something. To be able to sleep peacefully is better.
Exactly.
I'm done. I can
Thank you so
May
much,
the spirit of
Sikunjema.
Sankara continue to
you
live
guys
in
have a
you.
great time.
Yes.
All right,
Looking forward
bye.
to working with you some more. Looking forward to
You
working
too.
with you some more.
Thank
Thank
you
so
very
much.
much.
Sikunjema.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
evening. Samuel, get in that chat and put that link in there, please. Yeah. That was great.
If
It
it's
was great
any,
to have
if it's
our sister with
anything,
us.
if it's anything we learn from that, your food should not be fast.
Listen,
There you go.
take your time with your food. Ikemba, did you have any other questions now with my brothers Alimadi and Adesoji with us? Did you, first of all, did our sister answer your question? Let's get to that first.
Indeed, yes.
Kabisa, look at that. So this, I want to mention this. First of all, I love your t-shirt. Uhuru, all the way, freedom, liberation for all people. But Ikemba is a brother in the United States, a descendant of enslaved Africans who is going back to his roots and learning his African language. So you'll hear him, he's saying ndio because he's learning Kiswahili. And I encourage all Africans to learn your African languages. These
To
are
learn
important.
And I nominate
African
Sister Nduku as an instructor.
I am an instructor. You
There
can
you
find me on Clubhouse.
You
Those of
could-
you who know Clubhouse, you can find me on Nubia. You can find me wherever I am. You can find me on Kumbukeni at kumbukeni1@gmail.com. Send us an email if you need to learn Kiswahili. We will provide the lessons. And Yoruba. I'm going to throw my brother under the bus, brother Adesoji. But Ikemba, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, just I do. I want to hear your thoughts because I definitely agree with the sister and her take on the GMOs and it being different. I guess like what I'm trying to argue, even if it's not GMO, but just like we have the capability of creating something, right, to make sure that we're able to feed the people sufficiently. I mean, if we could do that organically too, and I'm not saying like replace that either, but I'm looking for something where we have a system, a universal system, a global system where all people have access to food. And so making this transition where people are not really like reliant upon having to have resources to pay for food. Like this is a human right, whatever that may be. And we can't have anything, of course, that's going to be detrimental to humankind. That's what I think like capitalism and, you know, these GMOs, this is the problem because they'll pump out poison, right? But that's all. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. If you have any thoughts, that's it.
I mean, for me, the one lesson I will go to is if you look at a country like Burkina Faso, when Thomas Sankara arrived on the scene in 1983, there were land tenure rights. Not that the land was not tenable, not that you can't plant on the land, but you know, you had to pay to a feudal lord the access to the land. The first thing he did was nationalize the land. And then once the land was nationalized, he created, dams, little dams, water, generate access to water. With that, he told people to get on with it. So people actually normally would know what to plant in a certain part of the country, and they did. And the country went from being food dependent to being food sufficient in 4 years. In 4 years. That's a place where they know when the rains are coming. There's a desert just up north. So imagine in a place like Nigeria that has abundant land, place like and people are allowed to access to the land and they're allowed to get on with it. Imagine what is possible. It's not that they can't. It's not that the systems are not there. It's just that, just like the good sister was saying earlier, people just come in between, trying to interpret where there is no interpretation needed. I mean, the idea that certain seeds are better than. Listen, you don't know about the land than the farmer who has been farming that land for God knows how long.
Exactly.
You don't.
So,
you don't.
Brother Adesoji, what I'm hearing you say is leave Africans to be. Leave them alone. Let them decide what their food supply is going to look like, right? We are at the end of our session today. Thank you so much, Brother.
Yeah, I just
Ikemba,
want
for
to add
joining
quicker
us.
to
Go
that.
ahead.
Just give me
Quickly,
30
yes.
seconds.
Yes.
What the brother is really saying is that under capitalism, we cannot really tackle these issues. And I agree with him. We can't tackle it overnight the way Sankara did in Burkina Faso. But I think we can start giving people their independence slowly without overselling revolution and make them more revolutionary without necessarily telling them they're being revolutionary. So if we can show them why GMOs are bad, why indigenous seeds are good, they take agency over their food production. That is a very revolutionary act. As the sister was saying, some things we don't need to do too publicly. And then at some point, when the people are ready, then maybe we can spark that type of Sankara type revolution.
Yes.
You know, I agree with the brother. Right now, we are beholden under this vicious capitalistic system enforced by the World Bank, the IMF, and the World Trade Organization. So if we can't clash with them head on, at least let's start teaching people revolutionary skills without necessarily telling them this is a revolution. That's how I would respond to your question.
Go ahead.
Can I just quickly leave with what Brother Alimadi just said there just chimes well with what Che Guevara would say. You don't practice revolution until almost everyone is ready. You don't put your head above the parapet, otherwise it will be shot off.
Yeah. And how can we get ready, Brother Adesoji, bringing up Che Guevara? Listen, y'all. This is a different ball game. So if you thought you were coming to play baseball or tennis, we are on a different ball game.
Wait, but Fidel like baseball. You forgot.
Yep.
Fidel love baseball.
Oops. My thing is, so now what we are saying as far as food goes is, if you're that farmer in Africa, continue saving that seed. If you're that farmer in Africa, share with your fellow farmers this seed. Grow your crops. Do not buy this new seed that is being sold to you. If you're a person like ourselves, maybe don't go to McDonald's as often. Don't get sold the okidok of the fast food. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, my brothers, for always being in conversation with me. I always enjoy it. Thank you, Ikemba, for joining us for the question. We wish you all the best. Again, Ikemba on YouTube, you can find him at We Charge Colonialism. Ikemba, you can put your link in the chat when you get off.
Kwaheri Sikunjema. The brother joins us again,
Yes, and hopefully you join us again. I'm going to let you go so that you can quickly put that in the chat while we're still here. And then quickly, I am going to, or rather, Kumbukeni, sorry. We are a community, right? We encourage you, please, to support us. You can join us as a Patreon at patreon.com/Kumbukeni, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Kumbukeni1.
And remember to click the like button.
Yes, please like and subscribe. We are like on the videos, yes, and subscribe, please. And we have a goal this month to hit 1,000 subscribers. If you can please help us get to that number, that will help us continue doing this work. That will give us more time to get into these books where our ancestors have put the information and where people who've done the research have put the information so that we can share it with you all. Brothers, anything as we say Kwaheri?
Asanteni sana. May the spirit of Sankara live within all of us.
As like Sankara would say, you are what you eat. So be careful what you
We're celebrating Sankara today as we speak about our food safety. Kwaherini. Asante sana, everyone.
Okay.